And
so we can record you.
so their recommendation at that point was just to replace the drainage pipe.
Correct, based on all the other scope of the drainage work we're doing all throughout the project.
Okay. But now it appears that just replacing the drainage pipe is not going to solve the problem.
Correct. When they got into construction last year, got in that area, and came out and looked at it, that's correct.
But what's the difference? Why a difference when you looked at it before and then when the construction got started? Was it because of the increased erosion down there that wasn't anticipated, or did something else happen because of the construction to put more pressure on the slope that caused it to erode further?
I can't answer that. I mean,
okay. Well, I guess that's just what I'm trying to figure out is why we didn't have full knowledge and this wasn't, what we're doing now wasn't actually put in the plans. Because I understand that had it been put in the plans in the original bid, then it would increase the estimate and therefore the percentage of monies available from the feds and NOACA would be more, and that would be less cost for the city to pay. That's what I was advised. I don't know if that's true or not. Do you know if that's true or not?
As Mukin said before, that ODOT reviewed the change order plans, said it was project eligible, which is the 80-20 split. So,
but if there was a change order, it's not?
No, regardless if it was in the project originally or now, ODOT agreed it was essential to the project and could be included as normal project participation.
So is it possible that 80% of this cost of the slope stabilization will be covered by the other funds other than what the city has to pay, so the city share is really only 20% of this cost?
If you get additional funding, yes.
Additional funding from who? NOACA, or I don't think the feds are going to give us any more money, aren't they? Are they? Anybody know?
Well, NOACA money is based on NOACA district based on.
So it is eligible, but yet NOACA is saying they're not going to pay it? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think it's just the matter of that you've exhausted the contingency amount with the prior change orders.
But had this been included in the original plan, then with the contingency, that money, that whole pot would have gone up, and then this could have been included. Is that possible?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Through you, Shelley, Ned Foley with CT. I think I understand where you're coming from, and certainly I appreciate the magnitude of these numbers. And I don't think there's any question that we probably under-recognized the seriousness of that issue initially when it came up and dealt with only the issue toward the surface toward that chamber. But it's my understanding that, okay, and there really would have been no reason for us not to have included it in the project. Nobody was trying to avoid that. But had it been included in the project, more than likely this would have been the cost of it. It's my understanding at that point in time that we went to bid, the amount of funding that the city had from ODOT and all other sources, there was a fixed number. As long as we were within those budgets, there was an 80-20. If this entire project started to exceed all the monies available, then that excess money became 100% city. So, yeah, if this were included in the original project, then the original bid price would have been about $17,400. I think, in that sense, yeah, it would have been covered. It would have been eligible cost for the federal funding. I think at this point, because a significant amount of money was used up on additional pavement repair and on the adjustment in the asphalt prices, a lot of the leeway that we had in that contingency disappeared. So all of a sudden, any changes that occurred, be they the line item extensions for changes in estimated cost, they're all outside the envelope of funding. I don't want to leave with the impression that, okay, because this wasn't included, you lost funding. I think the fact that this thing is over available funding, that would have occurred anyway, even if it were inside the project, because of the magnitude of the changes that really did occur with the pavement. I mean, I remember bid day when the bid came in very low, everybody took a sigh of relief because we had a lot of latitude between that number and where we knew the funding would be. Unfortunately, a lot of that was lost in that paving. But, I mean, clearly, had this been included in the design, I think we would still be facing, all things being equal, the same differential between the contract and funding at this point, because something else would have tripped us over. So, from a funding standpoint, yeah, we could have done a better job, made sure that it was included in initially, but I think the overall cost would have been the same. I really, first time I really saw the area was tonight, and you know that certainly didn't happen overnight, but it's probably gotten worse in the last year. I guess I concur with Brian. I think over time, a very short period of time, there could be some damage to the new roadway. So there would be some serious consequences if this thing is delayed for a lengthy period of time. But the potential of looking for other funding exists, and there might be some reason to do that. But to say that you could just walk away from it and never do it, I don't think that's the case. I think this particular area of devastation will eventually eat into the roadway and become a bigger problem than it is.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I could just make one more comment. Was it recommended when CT went out there to look at the site, was it recommended to the city to do the slope stabilization at that point? Was that ever brought out and saying, you can do this, but we maybe recommend the slope stabilization instead of doing the latter?
I don't think it was. I think there was poor communication. I think our understanding of the problem didn't extend to the full slope. As I said, I think we under-recognized the magnitude of the whole problem. We were dealing with what was a lot more obvious on the surface, the chamber, the roadway runoff, and didn't really take into account the full extent of that damage beyond that chamber. So in that extent, it's clear that we didn't recognize it. I mean, there would have been no reason not to. So our recommendation really was to deal with the issues more on the surface, convey that drainage into that chamber. And then when we got into construction, a lot of the clearing took place. It was real obvious that, okay, more needed to be done here. But at the time that we were initially contacted by Mookin and looked at it, I think our recommendation really dealt with dealing with the surface drainage in that existing chamber and not the slope. So should we have carried it another step forward? Probably we didn't, but there wasn't any reason for us not to do that. And I think dealing with it during construction, that's not abnormal. Those things do occur. I think what we're facing right now is we've used up that money for something else. So this is really a serious money issue as well as it is a serious structural problem. But I think from the standpoint of cost, it's probably not costing you any more now as a change order than it would have if it was included in the project. But you just don't have the luxury of money within the funding to pay for it.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. Committee members have any other questions?
One more thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mr. Tanner.
if I may, to Mr. Schilling, in talking about, and we're talking about Mr. Schilling, where last Thursday, I guess was, you mentioned that you knew exactly where they were talking about in this one situation and that, and I take it today that that's right, what you're saying, and what I want to answer it and don't know who can do it, but as Mr. Schilling was saying, and that was there, then if he knew and he knows the exact spot you're talking about, why didn't our people catch it and take care of it when they were doing the job and it was included and it hasn't been done? And whether you have an answer or not, personally, my own opinion, somebody is goofed. Somebody's made an error here. We just don't know who. But as the gentleman was just saying, well, it might have been either way. But if this was all in the original bid, out of that 80%, we would have got more than what we actually got to pay for, and we wouldn't be hit for all of it now. That's my problem. Okay? Somebody goofed. It's that simple, and then no one wants to admit it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tanner.